Welcome back. I'm Tyler, you're watching Scarfing Scarves, and welcome to the 13th installment of Last Week Lolita News. At the top of the segment, Garden of Eden released to a cacophonous Catholic silence as the totality of the series remains entirely in stock. Reports from more reasonable sources indicate that could have something to do with increased stock levels in order to combat the types of bloodbaths and scalping that were once common with AP releases, but I'm going to ignore that in favor of saying this was a direct response from the Lolita community in favor of dress designs that don't immediately remind them of stringing up some Jewish guy and calling it a day. Put flowers on it all you want, I will never get that image out of my mind. Moving on to news unrelated to kawaii-fied images of suffering and death, Metamorphose released a refreshing summer print in the way of their Dreaming Heart Lemon series. The design is rife with the kind of things that Lolitas are made of, and while I can't exactly speak for the intentions of random teddy bears that seem a tad too pleased to be mounting the lemons in ways I'm pretty sure will not lead to lemonade, the print reminds this reporter enough of summer lemonade stands to get away with what I'm certain is a serious health code violation. Try not to think about the specifics of that joke, and you can continue on your way with your psyche intact. Turning towards social news, several Lolita communities vanished from Facebook without warning last week as members woke up to find the space once occupied by their comm replaced by a giant blue middle finger. No explanation was given by Facebook to explain the sudden disappearance of frilly dress communities, while groups dedicated to unbridled debauchery remained fine and dandy, and it took the sleuthing of some dedicated kawaii individuals to dig up reasons for the purge unrelated to conveniently sharing a name with the kind of concept that makes me want to buy a shovel, paint it pink, and keep it handy just in case anyone named Humbert happens to walk by. My imminent incarceration aside, the source of the disappearing communities became pretty clear after a certain previously Lolita-owned website changed hands to land in the lap of someone who seems to take joy in scaring the living donuts out of people with a flashbang of pop-ups and viruses. The website was previously a large Lolita resource used to look up measurements, washing instructions, names, and pictures for various brand releases. Its usefulness led it to be linked to or spoken of in just about every Lolita community, and the ensuing transition from frilly hub to ravenous hellscape of infectious cancer had Facebook bots do what Facebook bots do, which is to say, torch everything and watch it burn from a distance. The affected communities are reportedly rebuilding, but it's highly doubtful that people will get over their paranoia of using the L word anytime soon following the Great Purge. Crossing my fingers that using EGL will throw off enough Humberts that my shovel can stay in the shed. Speaking of blunt trauma to the skull, Rufflechat had me wondering if a certain party had been treated to a lobotomy in the wake of an argument that spanned nearly 300 comments long. The brawl began with one poster's request for suggestions on how to mentor someone who recoils at the idea of spending even $15 on a skirt. The mentee said they're going to build an outfit for less than $30 at a thrift store, and refused any and all suggestions that entailed the remotest trace of fiscal fact, like you're coming at them with a double barrel full of unsubsidized student loans. The mentee in question seemed particularly resistant to the idea that Lolita Fashion would require more initial investment than a date night at Golden Corral, and after several perfectly reasonable comments to attest to that fact in the nicest way possible, it was clear the consensus leaned in the direction of classifying the style as something utterly obtainable at budgets flexible enough to spend at least $30 on the petticoat alone. Everyone was perfectly reasonable. No one said anything offensive. And the Lolita community was all set to end a conversation without even remotely resembling the preemptive steps to a large-scale nuclear explosion. That is until a certain someone brought in 11 years of enriched uranium bitterness and mashed the big red button like it would take out every brand whore for the next 100 miles. This someone shall be called Janice. She took exception to her fellow commenters' attachment to reality, and rather than voice her disapproval in a way that most functioning adults would describe as containing the barest modicum of decency, she proceeded to heckle the hell out of anyone who dares suggest that you need more than a pack of top ramen and a hate boner for the establishment to enter this fashion. Classism was mentioned, the community as a whole was accused of being a debaucherous hellhole of unsympathetic privilege, and after indicting any remaining parties of being rude and nasty in the face of her one-woman fit fest, she threw out a line not unlike a sinking ship at sea. Forget the rules and wear what makes you happy. Which, outside of the mating call of the wild Edas that roam the Milano-strewn hillsides of this fashion, is the the advice equivalent of telling a professional football player that they should stop training because some kids at the park are playing the same game and you can watch for free. Luckily for the segment of the population that can discern between professional activities and the pithy abilities of some kid that just learned to tie his shoes, the incident was finally brought to heel by a moderator for reasons I'm going to write off as rampant stupidity. It is this particular strain that brings us to Last Week Lolita News' next special segment, in which I try to lower my blood pressure, you ponder the stress-reducing qualities of prescription tranquilizers, and no one learns anything they hopefully didn't already know before leaving the house like a flaming bag of poor aesthetic decisions. Welcome to Requirements of Lolita. So what requirements and why? Unlike much more lenient alt fashions that subscribe to a general color palette and not much else, Lolita Fashion is defined by strict standards in order to maintain its place as a fashion distinct from others that would otherwise absorb it. A Lolita community suffused with Western goth fashion is a community you'd have to wade through with an industrial-sized sieve to find an AP post. No one wants to dig through a tidal wave of steampunk to find one Lolita coordinate and closet of frills, and letting up on our nitpicky rules for even a second invites the kind of cancer that leads to a hostile normcore takeover. All the skirts would be khaki colored, everyone would wear tennis shoes, and the shrines to Steve Jobs would pile up so high you couldn't sneeze without hitting a Macintosh computer. Never trust a man that wears the same thing every goddamn day. You know they have megalomaniacal intentions, and while we're on the subject, allow me to project my very specific standards onto the entire public at large. Rule 1. Wear a fracking blouse. Unlike the dick-happy prostitutes running around this year's Republican convention, Lolita is a conservative fashion. Blouses are central to this theme, and covering your shoulders is important to maintaining a cute look unassociated with the scandalous sight of exposed upper arms. That's half sarcasm, half reasonable expectation for entering a fashion that used to get a nosebleed over uncovered knees. You know what you're getting into, and if you have a problem with the notion of not capering about like some kind of oversized prostitot, I suggest you join a sluttier fashion like Fairy K, Menhera, or cosplay. In all seriousness though, wearing a blouse under your JSK looks better than none at all. The fabric will keep the sweat off your expensive garments, and you'll be thanking me later when your favorite dress isn't coated in whatever dollar store deodorant you've chosen for what I can only assume is a devoted interest in chemical burns. Rule 2. Legwear is non-negotiable. Socks are your friend. You can wear them at the ankle, under or over the knee, or eschew the inevitable amount of glue necessary to keep them up in favor of tights. But whatever way you spin it, thou shalt not leave the house like some kind of frat boy too concussed from last night's keg stand to remember that no one wants to see your freaking feet. Gym socks are not kawaii, and I'd suggest a nice cotton with a bit of soft lace at the top if you'd like to present an image not immediately reminiscent of a Bo-Peep prostitute with only $5 to spare. You might as well spend it on cocaine if you can't be hecked to scrap together a leg covering that can be found at even the saddest of Walmarts, and nothing fuels a special snowflake quite like a good white powder. Rule 3. Petticoats are essential. Outside of being the absolute foundation of any Lolita outfit, the shape of the petticoat defines the look of the garment that drapes over it. Hoop skirts are best left to those who know what they're doing before purchasing something nearly guaranteed to make any door access wholly uncomfortable. But so long as you're following the basic shapes of cupcake, A-line, or bell, no one's going to judge you for being a pertinent threat to shop displays and perched objects in general. You're not a real Lolita until you knock over a toddler with your poof, and you can consider it a badge of honor when an angry shop owner chases you out of their store for taking out several busts and a priceless statue of Alexander the Great. Install some beeping devices for when you're backing up, and consider the public fairly warned of the incoming floof. Rule 4. The dress must accommodate the petticoat. This should not be a particularly difficult concept, but when you go to the trouble of purchasing a petticoat that will give your garment that certain Lolita shape, it would behoove you to be sure the resulting effect doesn't look like an engorged sausage. Your dress is going to have to fit over whatever petticoat you've chosen, and anyone who's made the mistake of stuffing a cupcake petty under a constrictive A-line will know that something just doesn't look right. The other side of this coin is the people who seem to think that a Hot Topic tutu has the fortitude to hold up heavy folds of fabric, but there's little hope for those without the basic spatial understanding to discern between a flat tire display and the spare tire tucked away into most Lolita skirts. The good Lolita knows how to balance the two extremes without getting a blowout. Rule 5. Shoes wear them. Otherwise known as instruments to separate your feet from the random shards of disease-coated glass and stray needles mixture commonly known as your average American sidewalk, shoes are somewhat of a staple in Lolita fashion. Styles range from the fundamental tea parties all the way down to shoes that in any other context would be tapping their way down Skid Row. But few footwear outside of the much maligned sneaker are out of bounds so long as your coordinate doesn't look like you stumbled through a shoe rack on your way to the door. Except ballet flats, or Crocs, or anything that makes me want to beat you with the broadside of basic fashion sense. That is not a shoe, it is the abortion of Swiss cheese and lies. Rule 6. Put a bow on it. It doesn't matter if it's a head bow or flower crown, but something has to go on your head. Small or large, Madonna crown or random Catholic veil, anything that balances out the small explosion of floof in your skirt will work. Sure, some items will elicit groans from the crowd of those overexposed to whatever happens to be trendy, but so long as you follow the basic outline of this fashion, no one should drag you behind their carriage in person. Unless you wear a mini top hat, I will judge you and will be doing my utmost to set it ablaze with all the power of an overly obsessive hatred for an innocuous head covering that has done nothing more to harm me than being more visually offensive than any one person should muster. Rule 7. Accessorize. It doesn't have to be a lot, it could be nothing more than a nice necklace and a single ring. But you have to admit that anyone who goes to the trouble of decking on layers of decadent lace and ribbons may as well not cut themselves off at the knees when it comes to accessories. There's no real wrong answer when it comes to what suits your coordinate, and outside of decking yourself out in the blood of your enemies to make a point, everything from thrift store vintage to straight up AP plastic is up for grabs. Items like matching bags, wrist cuffs, bracelets, and parasols can be added at your discretion, and so long as you don't go out of your way to look like you dumped glue on your head and then rolled around in a pile of kids section's hair clips, nothing you wear should get you dragged out into the public square and beaten to within an inch of your life. Extra points if you match your jewelry to the theme of your outfits, and I lose my shit over anyone who wears tiny cat accessories to match their cat-themed prints. That's not a joke, I just really like cats, and bunnies, and ponies, and small bears with undiagnosed sexual urges to fuck lemons. Rule 8. Quality over quantity. Elsewise known as the law that thou shalt not look like the amalgamation of Party City and Hot Topic after a one-night stand, whatever you do, make sure your outfit looks like something you wouldn't be ashamed to wear on dates other than October 31st after 5 Jaeger bombs and an undignified amount of puking. The quality of materials is what separates Lolita from the plebeian hordes of people that think cosplay qualifies as a fashion statement. The feel of a nice cotton over the satin fire hazard you can purchase on eBay is not to be understated, and nothing ruins a tea party faster, quite like playing musical chairs on who's going to have to stand next to the human display of poor decisions. We'll give you all the help you need, but dear God, if I get the short stick, I'm going to step up my game on setting things ablaze. Because that's all the time we have for tonight. Thank you for watching Last Week Lolita News, and be sure to tune in next week when we tackle the tough questions like, why are Lolitas so mean? Should dirty plebes partake of our fashion? And will all this community live up to their reputation as vicious elitists because I've seen nothing but a pack of puffy bunnies? Where are you getting this freaking stereotype? Next time on Last Week Lolita News. This has been Tyler. You've been watching Scarfing Scarves, and I'll catch you next time. Hey guys, thanks for sitting through whatever bloated monstrosity I've released upon you post-editing. I'd like to send a serious thank you to the awesome people on Patreon who keep this show kicking along. And should you have the monetary decision-making ability of a pickled tuna, too little adult supervision, or an urge to set money in front of you and light it on fire, head over to patreon.com/lastweeklolita news. Thanks again guys, and I'll catch you next time on Last Week Lolita News.